Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when you watch this. Welcome, no matter what time of day you're watching it, to San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's virtual service. And most of you know, I am Sandy Ingham, the interim minister here, and I miss having you sitting out there in the chairs, but I can picture you. Flame of life, spark of the universe, that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom. We strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home by lighting this chalice. The opening words are titled, We Covenant, and it's just a portion of a very long covenant by Janice Marie Johnson. Here is part of it. Covenants are intentional. Covenants are audacious. Covenants are a promise that can change our lives together in this faith. Together, we will be stronger. Together, we will be wiser. Together, we will be gentler. So please join me now if you have the words or if you know them by heart while I read the affirmation. That's the covenant that you make with each other every Sunday morning. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Good morning, San Gabriel. It's lovely to see you all today, and I'm really happy that I can present a Wonderbox moment for you. So, as you UUs love to do, it's time to do some wondering together so that we can help each other learn and grow. And I've got my at-home Wonderbox right here. I'm going to shake it to give you some hints. There There's something noisy in there this time. Last week it was quiet. This week we've got noisy stuff. So let's open it up and see what I have. I hope you've made some guesses at home on what might be in here. Listen to that. I've got those numbers like you would put on your refrigerator at home with the magnet. Got several of them. I've been doing my homework that Reverend Sandy gave us last week about the different words to think about. And today she's going to be talking a lot about covenant. And so I was wondering, what story could I have that would help us think about covenant and what it means to us as a faith and as a people at San Gabriel. Put this down. Do you like my background today? It's a Texas field, something like you'd see right outside San Gabriel. So I have a story for you, and it's got numbers in it, but they're acting like people, and it really is a story about covenant. So think about that while you listen.
2 by Catherine Otoshi. 2 was a playful number. She was curved on top, straight on the bottom, and friendly and warm like the sun. Her best friend was 1. Whenever they'd get the chance, they'd dance. She'd sing and snap, he'd tippy-tap. What a pair they made. At the end of each day, they'd always say, 1, 2, I'll count on you till the end. We'll be best friends. Until 3 jumped in between them. You two are like glue, said 3, poking fun. Shake things up. Come play with me, 1. Odds are better than the rest, but 1 and 3 are best. 2 felt a shift. She watched 1 slowly drift away from her. 2 felt left out. Can I play too? She asked. You've had your time to play with 1, answered 3. We're playing odds only right now. 2 was blue. What did I do? 1 left without a word. Is it because I'm even and they're both odd? Let it go, said 0. Just ignore them, added 4. But 2 couldn't let go. At every turn, what did she see? 1 playing with 3. 1, 3, odds will be, they'd say. 2 felt a little green. Her heart felt sick, and she began to crack. The evens rushed over to comfort their friend. Such a shame things aren't the same. 3 is silly, said 4. 1 can't be best friends with 3. It's unlucky, said 6. 1 and 3 are just plain odd. Let's get even with those odds, exclaimed 8. 5, 7, 9 overheard the chatter. What's the matter? There's nothing wrong with being odd. Evens are great, stated 4, 6, and 8. Sometimes even greater than the odds. 0 saw the numbers collide. Why did everyone need to take sides? 5, 7, 9. We're all odd and we're just fine, shouted the odds. 4, 6, 8. Being even is first rate, yelled the evens. 0 watched all this hullabaloo. She raced over to 2. The numbers are dividing. Now the odds are at odds with the evens, and the evens don't want to get even with the odds. 2 felt split. But what can I do? She asked. Half of me doesn't care about that odd pair. Maybe it's time for me to be done with 1? That's the smaller side of you talking, said 0. You are greater than that. The evens and the odds are in a fight. What if you can make things right? Can you find it in your heart to see a new angle to this, possibly? 2 thought, and then, you're right, she exclaimed, flipping herself around. It is in me. I can be less than I've been, or greater than I am. The choice is mine. 2 pulled herself together and stood up tall. I have something to tell you all, she said. It's not easy to say. but I've come to see it's tricky to dance when there are 3. One should have other friends, and the same goes for me. 3 drooped. I'm sorry, 2, he said. I see now that playing the odds wasn't fair to you. Well, here's where we all agree, said 2. When the dance turns and shifts, let's groove and flow. If you're holding too tight, let go. Dance to your own beat. Do your own thing. Be free to explore what the new day can bring. Explore, said 4. Dance and mix, said 6. Rock and roll, said 7. Shake it up, they shouted. Soon all the numbers were dancing together, moving and grooving, shimmying and shaking, and spinning around like tops. It's fun to dance with everyone, said the numbers. 2 spun faster and faster, round and round. She got so dizzy that, oops, she bumped into 1. He teetered and toppled and almost fell down, but 2 caught him. Sorry, said 2. Me too, said 1. Both said nothing for a while. And then 1 said softly, Hey, 2, can I still count on you? 2 looked at 1 and said, It's the end. And guess what? We're still friends.
I think all those numbers did an excellent job of returning back to covenant after there was some brokenness amongst them. There was also an expansion of their covenant to include more of them. They started out as just 1 and 2, and then with a little help and a lot of thought and discussion, they increased the number of people while still maintaining their own relationships with each other. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in our RE hour today. I hope to see people on our Zoom call for that. And I hope during Joys and Concerns, you can talk a little bit about keeping covenant today. I will see you later. Bye.
Please join me now in a few moments of spoken meditation. And I invite you to be as calm as you can be, take deep breaths, and just concentrate on being in the moment. This is a meditation by Anthony Johnson titled The Future We Imagine. Let us call upon the Spirit that moves among us, below us, above us, and through us. Let us call upon those who have gone before us, who have shown us the way, who have been with us as guides and examples. Let us call upon ourselves to imagine, to hope, to dream, and to do, that the future may build on the past, but not be confined by the past. That the future we imagine will be a new thing and much more, and different, and better than anything we can imagine. May it be so. Amen. The reading I would like to share with you is titled Love First by Reverend Rebecca Parker, whom I cite all the time. You must be sort of feeling that you're beginning to know her. She writes, during the Civil War, Unitarian minister Thomas Starr King worked tirelessly for abolition. A mere 5 feet tall, he said, I may be small, but when I am mad, I weigh a ton. Like Starr King, we live in a nation that is at war and that has lost its way, a nation in which our presence as progressive people of faith, is needed, and even our anger is required. What we need, Parker goes on to say, what we need is a revolution in our values, a revolution that turns our attention more reverently and responsibly to the interdependent, relational character of life. What we need is a spiritual and practical revolution that embodies love for neighbor and for the world through sustaining structures of care and responsibility. 5 days after the hurricane, this would have been Hurricane Katrina, President Bush toured some of the devastation in Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi and said this was a time for people to love their neighbors as themselves. His comment suggests a view of love as a gesture of kindly help when the situation has become horrendously dire. Such a view of love is not sufficient. Loving our neighbor implicates us in loving the whole network of life. The interconnectedness of all things calls for wisdom and reverence. Maybe in the end, love will save us all, but it has a lot better chance at the beginning. We need to love from the start, not as an emergency strategy when everything has gone wrong. We must learn again to live with reverence. Reverence is a form of love. It is a response to life that falls on its knees before the rising sun and bows down before the mountains. It puts its palms together in the presence of the night sky and the myriad galaxies and recognizes, as poet Langston Hughes tells us, beautiful are the stars. Beautiful, too, are the faces of my people. Reverence greets all humanity as sacred. Reverence for life has to be learned, Parker writes. It is not just a feeling, it is a way of life that is manifested in more than an isolated moment of appreciation for nature or awe before its destructive or creative power. Reverence involves full-fledged devotion enacted in deeds of care and responsibility. It involves knowledge, study, and attention. Our society is currently guided by a worldview that is insufficiently grounded in reverence. Religiously, it is a worldview that regards the earth itself as trash. Economically, the dominant worldview regards human beings as self-interested individuals, motivated only by their personal desire to consume. And scientifically, it sees existence as devoid of value, atomistic, disconnected, and mechanistic. Such inadequate views are tearing our world to tatters by lack of regard for the communal character of life. Holy regard for knowledge is at the heart of our religious faith. A few years ago, when I visited my congregation's partner church in Oakland, Transylvania, Reverend Levante Kellerman took me into the sanctuary to see the ceiling of the 400-year-old Unitarian church in his village. And I should tell you as an aside that I have been in that church. Parker says, in typical Transylvanian style, the church has a wooden ceiling crisscrossed with beams creating a lattice of deep squares, which are painted with folk art depicting flowers and plants. Near the center of the sanctuary, the ceiling harbors a surprising image, a golden sun surrounded by circling planets in a star-spangled indigo sky. It is a diagram of the Copernican solar system at a time when religion was opposing science. Our ancestors in the remote mountains and valleys of Transylvania built sanctuaries that affirmed the discoveries of science. They did so even when the dominant religious culture advocated ideologies that allowed no new revelation and insisted that the old theories of how the world came to be had to be taught in the public schools. Parker concludes, "Our task now is to do what we can to advance reverence for life and deepen the promise of love. Let us make love the first, not the last, resort." This is an audacious task for a small movement of progressive people of faith. But to paraphrase Thomas Starr King, we may be small, but when we are mad, we weigh a ton. The weight of our passionate caring can help turn the world around. March is my least favorite month of the year, and it's not earning any points with me this year. I don't think that it will be moving up in my standings anytime now. Both of my parents were born in March, and both of them died in March. But the root of my dislike of the month stems from all those years of living in a northern climate. March is the month of betrayal, weather-wise. Gorgeous, warm one day, next day snowing, sleeting, freezing. Long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, the phrase March Madness referred to college basketball playoffs, at least in this country. Parker wrote, this, changing the world through a reverence for life and a deeper promise of love. This is an audacious task for a small movement of professional people of faith. But, to paraphrase Thomas Starr King, we may be small, but when we are mad, we weigh a ton, and the weight of our passionate caring can help turn the world around. Today, I invite you to be mad. Not only or primarily in the angry sense of that word. No, I invite you to be mad in the other sense of the word. Crazy, unhinged, audacious kind of mad. Mad as defined this way at dictionary.com, enraged, greatly provoked, or irritated. And we should be enraged, greatly provoked, and or irritated. Never mind that we should have been those things for decades. The tools are still available to us, as are some other tools for living purposefully and meaningfully. The skill of being audacious, the gift of being creative, imaginative creatures, the ability to be visionary beings, the power of covenant. I have become very fond of the concept of audacity over the past few days. Audacious is defined several ways. 1, extremely bold or daring, recklessly brave, fearless. 2, extremely original, without restriction to prior ideas or laws even. And 3, recklessly bold in defiance of convention, propriety, law, or the like, insolent, brazen. And 4, lively, unrestricted, uninhibited. I want us to be audacious as we go through these dark days. I want us to redefine March Madness, to set aside, at least for a while, its connection with college basketball playoffs. This year, 2020, I want you to think about taking that phrase to an entirely different place. I want Unitarian Universalists to redefine that phrase, March Madness. I want us to turn it into a time of boldness and daring, extremely original thoughts, recklessly bold ideas in defiance of convention, lively, unrestricted, uninhibited discussions and actions that will change the world. What better time to do this than in the midst of a world crisis that has already changed the world as we know it? Last time I checked, our physical movements are becoming more and more restricted. But our mind movements have no restrictions. Our minds can still go wherever we want them to go, in whatever creative, imaginative ways we want to direct them. What better time than now for experimenting with new ways of thinking? I am certain that we would not be the only people on earth engaging in this kind of madness. Illustrations and stories are everywhere of people all over the world who are going crazy in their thinking outside the box about what might happen to planet Earth after we emerge from the darkness of the coronavirus. Take today's Wonder Box story, for example. 2 is the name of that story, and it takes on topics that are almost never discussed with the very young. Questions are asked. Why do we need to take sides? Odds are at odds with evens, and the evens want to get even with the odds, and relationships get increasingly ridiculous. Topics such as white supremacy, ostracizing people, grief, betrayal, community, loss, friendship, all this happens to 2 when 2 gets shut out by 1 and other numerical characters. Until 2 learns that it might be possible to find a new angle that will include everyone. Is that possible? How do we direct our thinking into creating visions of the world that we want to see emerge from these times? How do we focus our madness on the positive, productive, progressive outcomes we want to see? Well, I think first we refine or redefine, restructure our covenants with each other. I have talked before about the importance of covenant, especially among people of faith. I want to go deeper into a discussion of covenant and urge you to think of a covenant as an opportunity to go mad and be audacious in your expectations of the world. Additionally, covenants need to be reviewed and brought up to date every so often, always keeping in mind that there are certain basic criteria or standards that must be a part of every covenant. The word covenant comes from French and Middle English roots in the word convenir. Its most basic meaning is simply to agree. Simply put, yes, but loads of meaning in those 2 words. To agree. Unitarian Universalist and Methodist minister Rebecca Parker says that at its simplest, covenant means to come together. More precisely, it means to come together by making a promise to love and care for one another. Unitarian Universalists often speak of covenant as a verbal statement of promise between individuals who, exercising their freedom of choice, bring community into being. I want to repeat that last sentence because we UUs have tended to ignore that part of covenant. Unitarian Universalists often speak of covenant as a verbal statement of promise between individuals who, exercising their freedom of choice, bring community into being. I also want to spend some time taking that statement apart, but you'll just have to look forward to that happening at a later time. I'm sure you'll just definitely look forward to that. At the center of all human relationships and interactions is a covenant. It might not be written. The people in the relationship or interaction might not even be aware of the fact that they are relating and interacting within the boundaries of a covenant. For those of us who gather in church communities, there's another foundational word at play here, a word just as important as covenant, and that word is theology. Not a word that Unitarian Universalists tend to use much. That is beginning to change because younger people in our association seem to be changing it. We seem to be less afraid of using the word and more interested in defining it within the context of our faith traditions, history, and experience. I have heard countless snarky, degrading, demeaning comments over the years disparaging Unitarian Universalist theology. Things like, well, that's not really a church. Did you get your ministerial credentials in a Cracker Jack box? Then there were the remarks from one of my best friends in high school, but by the time she made these remarks, we were in our 50s. She said, "You don't honestly believe that Unitarianism is a real religion, do you? I can't believe that there would be a seminary for heathens like you." Notice it's the Unitarian part of our heritage that generally receives the brunt of these comments. Why is it that we find it difficult to use the word theology? For one thing, we don't want to scare newcomers away, and we probably too often associate the word theology with the word dogma, or confuse the two words. But there's something deeper, I think, that troubles Unitarian Universalists around that word theology: fear. Fear that we don't really have a theology. And if that is true, what can we offer people? And if we are fearful that we have nothing deep and meaningful to offer people, how will we grow? And growth should be crucial to the covenant that we make with each other here at the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Is our Unitarian Universalist theology weak? Is it shaky? Or is it strong, robust, vital? Is it ferocious enough to get us through despair and to walk with us through these dark, scary times? Yes, it is. Because she is such a noted theologian in our times, I often turn to Rebecca Parker's writings about UU theology, especially over the last few years, as our Unitarian Universalist Association tries to make diversity mean something tangible and concrete, as opposed to falling back on words, words, words. Parker writes, "Our search for a theological center needs to be understood as a search for the solidarity and obligation that can carry us beyond this moral wasteland we currently live in and energize our devoted action on behalf of the global community. And we might begin this search by reimagining the way we speak of religious individualism and dissent. Behind the lone prophet who speaks up, there is a group," Parker tells us. We celebrate the lone prophet because there is a we present, a whole movement of us who hold to values that are fragile, dissident, and life-giving. Think about it. Because she is such a noted theologian in our times, I often turn to Rebecca Parker's writings about UU theology, especially over the last few years as our Unitarian Universalist Association tries to make diversity mean something tangible and concrete, as opposed to falling back on words, words, words. Parker writes, "Our search for a theological center needs to be understood as a search for the solidarity and obligation that can carry us beyond this moral wasteland we currently live in and energize our devoted action on behalf of the global community. We might begin this search by reimagining the way we speak of religious individualism and dissent. Behind the lone prophet who speaks up, there is a group," Parker writes. We celebrate the lone prophet because there is a we, W-E, present. A whole movement of us who hold to values that are fragile, dissident, and life-giving. Think about that. This astounds me. We celebrate the lone prophet because there is a we present, a whole movement of us who hold to values that are fragile, dissident, and life-giving. Yes, a whole movement of us who are not going anywhere and will still be here after the coronavirus is long gone. So it is extremely important that we go crazy however we can while we are physically confined and constrained. We have to be audacious in our minds and creatively continue to make our presence known while still sheltering in place. But we have the internet, and we still have the post office, I think, And we have phones. We know how to make our presence felt. So go crazy. Sprinkle some March Madness around. It won't surprise you when I say that I could do several sermons or reflections on UU theology, and you can look forward to that also in the future. But my main goal right now is to assure you that we have a grounding, a deep grounding, in that which matters most in the world, in religious truth, in divine knowledge. We have such strong spiritual and sacred underpinnings as Unitarian Universalists that going mad is second nature to us. We are proud of going against the grain of the culture. We brag about being in the forefront of social justice movements. We are only going to cause more trouble, and we're going to be happy to do so. Parker's theological stance always brings her back to a circle of life and to the spark of sacredness in every living being. She reminds us that when life faces life, within the circle of communion, we can see the center that is God, small g, present in our solidarity. Further, we critique any conception of God. We critique any conception of God that functions to bless an unjust status quo or pass the buck of human responsibility onto divine forces. We are not alone in our madness, though it may often seem that way. For instance, I give you a publication that is right there with us in covenanting to go mad with visionary ideas for the world. And I hope that some of you are already reading this publication. Yes Magazine, published quarterly. More about it can be found at yesmagazine.org. The spring issue just arrived. The editors put this on the front cover. Special issue, The World We Want. In an article titled, We've Got a Better World in Mind, they tell us that this is not the first time that things have felt hopeless. And we, as humans, have often made our greatest progress in the face of our greatest despair. Today we find ourselves again in need of a successful vision. I should point out that this was written before the coronavirus took over our world. The authors then quote Franklin D. Roosevelt. When there is no vision, the people perish. And here's something else from that article in the spring issue of Yes. Our founders of Yes Magazine, the founders 24 years ago, believed that every person matters and deserves to lead a dignified life, and that we are part of an interconnected web of life on which our existence and well-being depend. Does that sound familiar? It should. The editors of this magazine just quoted our first and seventh principles. And no, this is not a UU publication. This is part of the covenant that the people who publish Yes Magazine have with their readers. Ultimately, the goal is to dismantle destructive systems and replace them with restorative, restorative generative systems that create lasting well-being for all people and the planet. We hope to empower readers with an important tool to advance lasting change. So we are not alone in understanding the need for visionaries, the need for covenants that express the necessity of including vision in our covenants. We have an advantage, though, as UUs, a big advantage, in that our theology and our history are all about vision because we have always been free thinkers. So go mad. Put that free thinking heritage to work as you envision visions. I hope to see something in the covenant of this fellowship that speaks to how it will continue to grow. So your homework assignment for this week is to go mad, go crazy in your heads, working on a vision of how to grow a Unitarian Universalist community Write down all your ideas. No matter how crazy or far-fetched they may seem to you, when they pop into your head, put them down on paper or on the computer screen. This time of uncertainty and angst could and should be a golden opportunity to get our message out, to think about ways to spread the good news of Unitarian Universalism. Go crazy in your desire to learn more about Unitarian Universalism. Practice explaining it, describing what it means to you. Then pretend that you are doing this with a complete stranger who knows nothing about our faith tradition. I also hope to see more about a vision of harmony in the covenant of this fellowship. The affirmation does say to dwell together in peace, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. But I think maybe that needs to be expanded upon, fleshed out a little. I will end my remarks with these covenant words from Reverend Parker. We affirm a covenant among all beings that we honor with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We will do everything in our power to assure that this covenant is not broken. And we seek to connect our circle with other circles of life, to expand into ever-widening ripples of influence for good. Yes, Unitarian Universalism has a theological center. How extraordinarily fortunate we are. Be mad. Go mad. We still have 3 days left in March. Oh, March has been very long, hasn't it? But we still have 3 days left to enter into March Madness, although we must not restrict our madness to March. That's just a ploy. To get us started in our madness, be mad. Treasure going mad. It is a precious asset. We extinguish this light, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment, which it here symbolizes. These we carry in our hearts until we come together again, whether in reality or virtually. The closing words are titled, I Send You Out, and they are by Kelly Wiseman as Ruth Jackson. I send you out, in this case metaphorically. I send you out now to share yourself with the world. May its promise and complexity set your mind ablaze. May you hold fast to what your life has taught you. May you question everything. And when you have changed the world, and the world has changed you, may you return again to this place and share what you have learned with us. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be.